Mankind has always excelled at causing pain. For thousands of years, man has developed ways to inflict the most pain for the longest amount of time. From the rack to the Brazen Bull, history is full of very inventive methods of punishment. Perhaps one of the most gruesome is scalping. This brutal practice wasn't confined to one group or region. Instead, it emerged independently in various parts of the world, from the ancient Scythians of Eurasia to the indigenous tribes of North America and beyond. Scalping is the removal of the human scalp from a dead or living victim. A sharp tool, such as a metal or iron knife, would be used to cut an incision across the back and top of the skull, with the hair then being pulled to separate the scalp from the victim's skull. Though it is most associated with Native Americans, scalping has been practiced all across the world since time immemorial, having occurred in medieval England, ancient China, and even on the battlefields of World War II. The earliest known case dates back to the Mesolithic period, approximately 4,300 to 9,000 years ago in Sweden. Scalps were often seen as evidence of a person's martial abilities. The more scalps a man had, the greater and more prestigious the warrior. The ancient Scythians, who inhabited what is now Ukraine and parts of Russia, would wear the scalps of their enemies on the harness of their horses. In 1036, the English Earl Godwinson scalped many men, including the son of Anglo-Saxon King of Ethelred the Unready. The Scottish traveler John Duncan also observed an extensive collection of hundreds of scalps, taken as war trophies by the Dahomey Amazons, an all-female military regiment in the Kingdom of Dahomey, now Benin. The practice has existed in most parts of the world at various times, even if it was not a common cultural practice. Scalping in North America. Scalping was a common occurrence during the intertribal wars of the Plains Indians, such as the Comanche and the Apache. Warriors were not the only victims, as women were also attacked, and their scalps were harvested to decimate the power of the opposing tribe. Taking the scalps of civilians was considered an act of bravery, as it meant a warrior had ventured deep into dangerous enemy territory. At the site of the Crow Creek Massacre, which occurred sometime around the mid-14th century in South Dakota, 450 out of 500 bodies had had their scalps removed. Along with scalping, many bodies had their tongues cut out, their heads chopped off, or their bodies otherwise mutilated and burnt. Scalp taking amongst Native Americans continued at least until the American Indian War of 1864. Scalping was uncommon in Europe during the early days of North American colonization, but when European settlers learned of the practice, they were more than willing to make use of it. Both English and French colonists placed bounties on Native American scalps in order to encourage their native allies to fight for them. During the Dummer War of the early 18th century, 100 pounds was paid for the scalp of a Native American male over the age of 12, while 50 pounds was paid for women and children. The bounty was eventually extended to include the scalps of European settlers. Bounties were placed on English scalps during the Seven-Year War, whilst during the King William's War, fought between the British and the Iroquois Confederacy against the French settlers and the Wabanaki Confederacy, both sides paid for the scalps of their European enemies. Some men became dedicated scalp hunters. John Lovewell, a militia captain in 18th century New Hampshire, conducted an expedition to New England, specifically to harvest native scalps, though it was largely unsuccessful. After one of his more successful raids, he paraded through the streets of Boston, wearing a wig made of scalps. One infamous case of scalping is that of Hannah Duston. In 1697, her town was raided by Abenaki, who took her and her infant daughter captive. Soon after her capture, as she and the other captives were forced into the wilderness, her 6-day-old daughter was murdered by having her head crushed against a tree. After some days of traveling, they were taken to and held on a small island in the Merrimack River. During the night, as the Abenaki slept, Dustin and another captive killed them with their own hatchets. To claim a bounty and to prove their story, they scalped 2 men, 2 women, and 6 children. After reaching safety in Boston, they collected their bounties from the Massachusetts authorities. The Sand Creek Massacre during the American Indian War of 1864 is famous as one of the last incidences of mass scalping. A force of 675 men from the 3rd Colorado Cavalry charged into a Cheyenne and Arapaho village. The number of casualties is disputed, with figures ranging from 69 to 600, but it is believed that over 60% were innocent women and children. Survivors. Scalping was not fatal in itself. Those scalped in North America were usually either dead to begin with or killed shortly after scalping. But there are many cases of survivors who recovered and went on to live otherwise healthy lives. As with all injuries during the period when antibiotics and germ theory had not yet been developed, the main risk was infection. Robert McGee was 13 when he and his family set out to travel the Santa Fe Trail. His family died during the perilous journey, and he continued his travels with a wagon train transporting goods to New Mexico. The wagons had an armed guard following them to protect them from bandits and natives, but they were delayed somewhere near Kansas, leaving the civilians traveling with them vulnerable. A band of Sioux Indians attacked the convoy, which was now unguarded. When the soldiers caught up, they discovered everyone had been killed and had their scalps removed. They soon came across the bodies of McGee and another young boy, who had both miraculously survived the ordeal. The wounded boys were taken to Fort Larned, though the one boy soon died from his injuries. After a long period of recovery, McGee was back to full health, with the only evidence of his ordeal being a bald patch and a large circular scar on the crown of his head. He lived until at least 1890, when his photograph was taken and his experiences written down. Another survivor was Josiah Pugh Wilbarger, a teacher and land surveyor. During a land survey, the group encountered a seemingly friendly Native American. As they drew closer, he rode away, and the group became suspicious of his intentions. After stopping to consult and rest their horses a few miles east of what is now Austin, Texas, they were ambushed by a group of around 60 Comanche warriors. After a brief skirmish, some were wounded, while most had managed to escape. Josiah, who had suffered a bullet to one leg and an arrow to the other, was abandoned by the remainder of his party. He was stripped naked and had his scalp cut off. He was fully conscious during the event, but reports feeling no pain, only hearing an ominous roar and peal of distant thunder. He lay there half-conscious and in a dreamlike state until the evening, when the blood loss and pain finally awoke him. With the last remaining bit of his energy, he dragged himself to a nearby spring, which he drank from and lay in, finally falling asleep on the bank of the spring. By morning, the bleeding had stopped, but blowflies were now feasting on his open wound. After some time, he was rescued and taken to the hospital, where his injury was treated with bear oil made from rendered bear fat. He survived for another 11 years, but his skull never fully recovered and was weak and brittle. He died after hitting his head on a low wooden beam, cracking it open and exposing his brain. Treatment. It is not known how many people survived scalping, but there is very little documentation of the methods used to repair the injury. Many medical journals mention people recovering, but do not describe the treatment used. One record of the procedure we have is from the writings of French surgeon Augustin Bellost, sometime in the 17th century. He claims that skin and hair cannot form on a smooth skull, so it must be roughened up with a rasp and pierced down to the diplo, the soft, spongy layer separating the hard inner and outer layers of the skull. Fleshy growths form at the openings, producing new capillaries and scar tissue, allowing blood to circulate, and eventually resulting in new skin growth. In some cases, the fresh scalp was grafted back onto the head, but this was very rare and only possible if done very quickly. If the scalp was left untreated, the bone would either rot and die, turning black, or the marrow would become seriously inflamed, both being fatal. In 1769, pioneer James Robertson reported seeing a man from South Carolina who had been scalped 8 years prior. His skull was still exposed and had turned black. Less than a year later, he died. The bone had turned necrotic and eventually separated from itself, exposing his brain to the elements. Robertson learned how to treat a scalping from Dr. Patrick Vance, and his son recorded his experiences. Using a hand drill and awl, he would bore many holes in the skull, 1 inch apart. After drilling the first set of holes, he would then drill more in between. He drilled into the soft inner layer, and the appearance of a red fluid on the awl was the sign to drill no deeper. These fresh wounds had to be dressed and cleaned at least once a day. An infection anywhere was dangerous, but an infection so near to the brain was almost definitely fatal. The recovery was slow, usually taking as long as 2 years, but the success rate was quite high. Sometimes hair was even able to grow back, though thinner than before. This basic method is still in use today, though with more modern tools and medications. The end of scalping. The last instance of scalping came in 1934. Francisco Fimbres and his family were traveling through the countryside on horse when they were set upon by dozens of Apache. Unable to fight them and holding his baby daughter in his arms, Fimbres went to seek help, while his son was taken and his wife was cut into pieces, with her unborn child cut out of the womb. Enraged, Fimbres vowed to kill the Apache who did this. Americans crossed the border into Mexico to help him in his hunt. While not finding the men who killed his wife and stole his child, they returned to town with the scalps of 2 Apache women and an Apache war leader. Scalping played a prominent role in pre- and post-colonial North American society. It was used as a way to display one's power, as a way to intimidate one's enemies, or used by one group to encourage another to fight their opponents for them. The conflict between English and French settlers only fueled the fire, as even the scalps of defenseless women and children were worth a handsome sum.